Have you ever wondered what a family celebration looked like before modern parties, before electric lights, before music came from a speaker instead of a pair of rough hands and a weathered fiddle? Out on a ranch where the land was wide, the work was hard, and every occasion had to be made special by the people themselves, because nothing arrived ready-made, and joy was something you built together out on the old ranch. Celebrations were never just about the day itself. They were about relief, memory, pride, and survival, because every occasion marked something bigger than a date on a calendar. It meant the family had made it through another season, another harvest, another winter, another birth, another year of storms, sickness, work, and uncertainty, and that was reason enough to gather closely and turn an ordinary patch of earth into something unforgettable. The rancher did not celebrate the way city people did, with polished halls or fancy invitations. He celebrated with what the land gave him and what the family could make with their own hands, and that is what made those occasions feel larger than life, because every table, every song, every meal, every decoration came from labor, from love, and from the silent understanding that nothing could be wasted, not food, not time, not a chance to be together. When an occasion approached, the feeling changed days in advance. The ranch itself seemed to know itches were still done, animals still had to be fed, fences still needed checking, but beneath the work there was an energy moving through the family like wind through dry grass. The children noticed it first, because adults began speaking in half-whispers. Women planned meals in the kitchen. Older sons were sent into town for sugar, coffee, flour, or cloth, and the rancher, usually spoke in practical terms about weather and livestock, grew a little softer around the edges, as if even he allowed himself to step briefly out of survival and into remembrance. Birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, baptisms, successful harvests, the end of cattle drives, Christmas, Easter, and even simple reunions after a long absence could become an occasion worth honoring. And on a ranch, any occasion took on a deeper meaning because distance made every visit precious. Family might travel for hours by horse, wagon, or later bitrock. Neighbors might come from miles away, and each arrival meant more than attendance. It meant effort, intention, and respect. The day usually began before sunrise, not because celebration allowed idleness, but because work had to be finished early. If the family wanted a few precious hours of freedom, the rancher was often already outside in the cold morning air, checking stock, hauling water, splitting wood, making sure no last-minute problem would ruin the gathering. And while he worked, the house came alive behind him, lamps lit before dawn, pots set on the stove, flour dust rising in the kitchen, the smell of bread, roasted meats, cinnamon, coffee, and wood smoke curling together into the scent of anticipation. Food was the heart of it. Albuquerque's food on a ranch was never casual. It was proof of provision, and during celebrations the family put forward the best they had in it, because they were wealthy, but because generosity was a form of honor. The rancher might slaughter a chicken, a pig. In bigger celebrations prepare beef from the herd. There would be biscuits or cornbread, beans, slow cooked with fat and seasoning, potatoes, fresh churned butter, pies, if fruit had been preserved, cakes if sugar could be spared, and preserves opened from carefully guarded jars saved specifically for moments that deserved sweetness. And that was the thing about these celebrations. Sweetness itself was ceremonial. Best on hard land, sweetness was rare. Children knew it, adults knew it, which is why a slice of pea, a spoonful of jam, a piece of cake, or candy brought from town felt almost magical. And the rancher, though stern most days, often became unexpectedly generous on such occasions, slipping the children extra portions, pretending not to notice sticky fingers or crumbs on their shirts, letting the rules bend just enough for memory to take root. The ranch house, whether large or humble, became the center of the world on those days. Every room had a purpose. The kitchen belonged ghetto noise and labor. The front room became a place of greeting and conversation. Porches filled with boots, hats, laughter, and tobacco smoke. The yard turned into a space for children to run, cousins to wrestle, dogs to bark, and older folks to sit in chairs pulled into patches of sun. Even the barn and corrals became part of the occasion, because guests always drifted out to look at horses, inspect calves, admire tack, and discuss weather off the occasion. Because guests always drifted out to look at horses, inspect calves, admire tack, and discuss weather. Usually did not talk about. On ordinary days he was simply the man working, fixing, counting, and enduring, but on a family occasion he became something more visible. The keeper of tradition, the provider, the storyteller. Theon, who remembered how his own father had done it, and how his grandfather before him had marked weddings, Christmas mornings, and homecomings, and though he might not say much directly, his choices revealed what mattered: which animal to butcher, where to set the long table, which neighbors to invite, what song should be played first, one grace should be said, and when the children should finally be called in to eat. There was often a ritual to getting dressed, and even that carried meaning, because ranch clothes were made for work, not display. So when an occasion came, the family reached for the garments reserved for respect: freshly washed shirts, polished boots, dresses carefully mended, ribbons in the girl's hair, hats brushed clean, belts and buckles worn with quiet pre-death. The rancher might shave more carefully than usual, smooth back his hair, and wear the good jacket he saved for Churchtown. And none of it was vanity. It was a declaration that this day stood apart from the rest. Music, when it appeared, changed everything. One fiddle, a guitar, maybe a harmonica, sometimes a piano if the family had one and someone in the house knew how to play. And suddenly the room shifted from gathering to celebration base. On ranches, music did not come packaged, it came alive through people. A cousin with quick fingers, an aunt who knew old songs, a grandfather who sang a little off-key but with great feeling. And once the playing started, stories loosened, laughter rose, feet moved, and for a few hours the burdens of land and debt and weather seemed to sit farther away than usual. Dancing was common where space allowed it, furniture pushed back, children imitating adults, older couples moving with the ease of long familiarity, boots striking the floorboards, skirts turning, hands clapping. Timid, the rancher, even if he acted reluctant at first, could be drawn in, because celebrations carried a gentle pressure. Ethy reminded even the most serious man that he belonged not only to work, but to people, and some to miss the sight of a hard rancher dancing with his wife, or lifting a small daughter onto his boots so she could sway with him, said more about the family than any speech ever could. And speeches were rare, at least formal ones, because ranch families tended to speak plainly, but there were toasts, blessings, and moments when someone stood at the head of the table and said enough to still the room. Thanks for the meal, thanks for the harvest, thanks for safe travel, thanks for a child born healthy, thanks for years shared between husband and wife, thanks to God, thanks to kin. And in those moments the rancher often bowed his head lower than any, because he knew exactly what it had cost to arrive at a day peaceful enough to celebrate. Children experienced these occasions as wonder: the rare abundance of food, the permission to stay up late, the arrival of cousins, the adults laughing louder than usual, the smell of candles and coffee and dust and horses, the lantern glow on faces they knew by heart. And yet what they did not understand at the time was that adults were building memory on purpose, giving the young something strong to carry into harder years, a sense that family did not gather only in grief or necessity, but also in joy. Seasonal celebrations had their own. Christmas on the ranch was especially powerful, not because it was lavish, but because scarcity made every gesture shine brighter. Greenery might be gathered from the land, decorations made by hand, paper chains, ribbons saved from old parcels, ornaments reused year after year, candles placed carefully, gifts small but meaningful, a carved toy, a scarf, a book, a pocket knife, something stitched, repaired, or hand-built rather than bought new. And the rancher often took a book, a pocket knife, something stitched, repaired, or hand-built rather than bought new. And the rancher often took time, skill, and care. Thanksgiving or harvest celebrations carried another kind of emotion. These were tied directly to survival. If the crops had held, if the herd remained strong, if enough hay had been put away, then the meal became a kind of public gratitude. And the rancher, who had spent months worrying in silence, could finally sit at the table and eat with the dignity of a man who had protected his household for another year, maybe not perfectly, maybe not without loss, but well enough to keep everyone going. Weddings on ranches were often the grandest occasions of Albuquerque. They joined not just two people, but two families, two networks of labor, memory, and loyalty. And preparation for such an event could involve nearly everyone. Food cooked in huge quantities, benches borrowed, flowers gathered wild or grown in garden patches, dresses sewn at home, animals moved aside to clear space. And when Thevos was spoken, whether in a churchyard or parlor, the celebration that followed was not only romantic, It was practical, communal, and deeply symbolic. It said, this family continues. This land will hear more footsteps, more laughter, more names. There were also quieter occasions, not famous enough for history but unforgettable to those who lived them. A son returning from war, a daughter coming home with her first child, a grandparent reaching an advanced age, a successful branding season completed without injury, the first rain after a punishing drought, the final payment on land that had nearly been lost. And in such moments the rancher might celebrate in simpler ways. An especially good supper, a bottle saved for years, extra coffee and conversation after dark, stories told on the porch while the stars came out one by one over the pasture because stories were essential. No ranch celebration was complete without them, and once the meal was done and thigh-first busyness eased, people settled into the ancient art of retelling. Old hardships became family legends. Blizzards survived, runaway horses caught, fences rebuilt, babies delivered in storms, disasters narrowly avoided, comic failures made funnier by Timon the rancher, who might seem reserved in daylight, often opened up in the evening, his voice slower, warmer, his voice softened by lamplight, recounting the people no longer present as if setting another place for them at theatable, through memory alone. That is how occasions became more than entertainment. They became a bridge across generations. Children learned who they belonged to, who had broken this soil, who had buried kin on the hill, had crossed rivers, lost cattle, planted orchards, weathered disease, or danced until dawn on wedding nights long before the children were born. And the rancher, by keeping those stories alive, gave the family something stronger than property. He gave them continuity. Even grief could sit near celebration in ranch life, because families living close to the land understood that joy and sorrow were never far apart. An empty chair might remain painfully visible at the table. A recently lost parent or child might be mentioned with tears and laughter in the same breath, and the occasion did not deny that absence. Instead, it made room for, which may be one reason these gatherings felt so real. They did not pretend life was perfect. They celebrated in full knowledge that it was fragile. Hospitality stretched beyond blood relatives, to neighbors, hired hands, drifters known by name, widows from nearby places, the preacher, deskultioka. Anyone who might otherwise spend the day alone could be welcomed in, because ranch communities survived through music, and a celebration was one of the clearest moments when that ethic became visible. More chairs appeared, more plates were set, portions were stretched, coffee kept pouring, and no one who arrived in goodwill was turned away lightly. The rancher knew that reputation mattered, not in a shallow social sense, but in the old rural way. How a man treated people at his table said something lasting about his character, and so family occasions became quiet demonstrations of values: generosity, respect for elders, inclusion of the lonely, gratitude for labor, reverence for faith, affection exerted through effort rather than grand words. And children watching all this were being taught even when no lesson was announced. As evening deepened, the celebration changed shape. The first rush of eating and noise gave way to smaller scenes. Dishes being washed by lantern light, old men talking softly outside, children falling asleep on coats or in their mothers' laps, young people drifting toward music again, couples standing on porches beneath a sky so clear it seemed almost endless. And the rancher, tired now in the deep way only physical labor can make a man tired, often paused in these hours to simply look around. Maybe he looked at the table scarred by years of use, at the faces lined by sun and time, at grandchildren he never expected to see, at sons and daughters grown into adults, at the wife who had helped him hold everything together, at neighbors who came when called, at food nearly gone because it had been at boots by the door, hats on hooks, horses quiet in the dark beyond the fence. And perhaps in that moment he felt the true purpose of celebration, not escape from ranch life, but confirmation of why ranch life was worth enduring, because that is what these family occasions revealed. Beneath the toughness, beneath the endless rhythm of chores and seasons, the rancher was not only building fences, herds, and barns, was building a world where his people could gather, where the young could feel rooted, where the old could feel honored, where hardship did not get the final word every single time, long after the music stopped, after the last wagon or truck disappeared down the road, after the dishes were retrieved and stacked, after the lamps were lowered and the children finally carried half asleep to bed. Traces of the occasion remained, crumbs on the table, footprints in the yard, laughter still hanging somehow in the boards off the house, leftover meat wrapped carefully, chairs not yet put back, and the rancher, before turning in, might step outside one last time into the cold night. There, under the stars with the land stretching black and silent around him, he could hear the low sounds of the ranch settle in Ginto darkness, the distant movement of cattle, the creak of wood, the breath of wind through grass, and perhaps he understood something that people far from such a life often miss. That celebration is most powerful not when it is easy, but when it is earned, when it rises from labor, from scarcity, from faithfulness, from people who know exactly how hard life can be and choose joy anyway. That is how the rancher Yuseto celebrate occasions with the family. Not with extravagance, but with intention, not with perfection, but with warmth, not by leaving ordinary life behind, but by transforming it for a day into something sacred, where food became a gratitude, music became memory, stories became inheritance, and being together became the richest thing anyone at that table. When we imagine them now, because in a world full of convenience, they remind us of something simpler and harder to build, that the deepest kind of celebration does not come from what is purchased, but from what issued, and on those ranches, in those houses lit by firelight and effort, the family did not merely mark an occasion. They made meaning out of survival, and turned one more passing day into a memory strong enough to outlive them all.